Hello everyone. So today we will be covering a DNS query record, which is SOA, start of authority, which is a primary part of every domain, which is mandatorily be there about each of the components that are used in that particular command. So let's get started. So the command we use is dig SOA google.com. So as you can able to see here that we receive the output as answer section, which is internet SOA, and this is our name server with the email address of any responsible person of that particular domain, and these all are the components that we're going to discuss now. Okay, so before I going to take you to this particular NS1, which is the name server 1, we first going to check that how many server the particular domain has. So let's dive in as dig SOA. Okay, and we type at the rate ns1.google.com, that we are asking this particular name server the detail of google.com. So here you can able to see with this output dig SOA at the rate ns1, the detail we got it from this particular command. Okay, and we search for google.com. So here you can able to see the authoritative section. Google has 4 particular name server, NS1, 2, 3, 4. These all are the record types for IPv4, IPv6. These are the SOA records that we're going to discuss now. So firstly, we're going to discuss about zone transfer process. So let's get started. While we used the SOA command in our dig tool, we able to get this particular output. Now this is our primary name server, correct? What we're going to do is that first we're going to discuss the zone transfer, and then we covered all of these components as well. Okay, so zone transfer is basically a process where, so as we already covered in our previous lectures, so guys, if you haven't watched my previous videos, I'll advise that I have created a whole playlist, and you can go through each of the playlist so that you can able to get from the beginner to the intermediate level of knowledge about DNS. So before we covered, there are two types of servers. One is primary server and second is secondary server, right? So primary we considered it as master and secondary is considered as slave. Okay, so here the zone transfer is basically a process where the master server file, okay, so master server zone file, okay, which will be copied to the slave ones. Okay, so firstly a zone file is created with a master server, or we can say a primary server. The master server automatically transfer the file to the slave server when it received a zone transfer request. Basically the secondary will request the primary for the SOA file, which is called as zone files. Okay, and the slave server send the request periodically to the master server to get the updated of zone files. So they must want the updated zone files, so they make request periodically. We're going to see how periodically the request will be made to the primary server, and the primary will serve to the slave ones. Okay, so there are basically two types of zone transfer request. The transfer request is also of two types. This is, guys, very deep of DNS. So one is the complete and the second one is authoritative zone transfer, which is, we can say, updated ones. Okay, so here it start that the step 1. So I'll be going step by step. Under first step, what it does is that the first time the master makes the complete zone transfer, okay, as the slave receives the zone file. Okay, so the first time the master send a complete complete zone file to the slave. Okay, now the next time, step 2. For each next time, the slave compares the serial number. Now the serial number comes into picture. Okay, now every time the slave will check for the serial number, okay, in their locally stored zone files. So under that slave there is also a zone file which has been sent by the master, right, that we already covered. So the slave will going to check locally saved zone file with the SOA serial number. Okay, so it is the SOA serial number. Now this is where this particular comes into picture component. So this is considered as serial number. So the serial number is basically depends on the admin, okay, and the administrator can able to do it. Now the admin can use the number from 0 to 4294697295. So out of this particular number, the administrator can use any of the serial number created by them. Some administrator can use it in the format of year, month and date or day. Okay, so this is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, and this one is the updated one. So if for example, if a particular date which is 2024, this is April, which is 04, and today is 16. Okay, and here this is the updated one. So for example, which is 0001, so each update of this particular date will be updated. Okay, so here comes the serial number comes into picture. Okay, so once a slave will compares the serial number with a locally saved SOA file, if both the files are same, means that the master zone file is not changed. Okay, it's not updated, and it keeps on using the locally saved zone file. Correct? If the serial number of the master and the slave is same, means that there is no update made by the master SOA file. Okay, and it keeps on using the locally saved zone file, right? Now if there is any change, if there is any change in the serial number, step 3, if there is any change, if there's any change, then it request, the slave will request for the complete zone transfer. Okay, request for a complete zone transfer. Who will do it? The slave will request. Okay, the master transfer the updated file and the slave will replace it with the saved ones. This will also update the serial number as well every time the master send the file to the slave. Correct? Now this is where the process comes into picture, as we already covered with the transfer types as well as the type of the server, zone transfers and all. We covered this as the serial number. Now what is this one? This one is basically called a refresh time. This is basically the time when the slave server should check the master server for the update. So for example, here if it's written as 900, okay, so the 900 seconds is the time the slave name server should check the master for the update, which is called refresh time. Now this one is, the second one is retry time. Retry time is a time when the slave name server failed to connect to the master server for the update. This is basically a master, this is basically a slave. Okay, so the slave, the retry time is also 900 seconds. So the slave, if cannot able to connect to the master server, then in what time they will again make the request. Then in 900 second again the slave try to send the connection request to the master. Okay, in every 900 seconds the retry time will going to perform its task. Now this is called expiry time. This is the time basically which is written as 1800 seconds. So the slave will going to make a request for the next 1800 seconds, which is called expiry time. So for example, retry time is that every 900 seconds. So after completion, so till this particular time, the slave will try to connect to the master name server. Now the next one is the negative cache TTL time, which is this particular time, which is called negative TTL also. So the negative TTL is basically when the resolver used to send the request to the name server, okay, and if it does not find the output, so let's take this as, for example, this is the resolver, okay, which is used to send to the master name server, okay, which is we take the name as ns1, okay. For example, if the resolver make a request for google.com or xyz.google.com to the master, which is called as ns1.google.com. If the master will reply as error message that they have no query output for the query for xyz.google.com that the resolver used to send the request. So the negative TTL value is a value that till that particular 60 seconds the resolver cannot able to make the request. So the resolver should obviously making the request after completion of that 60 seconds. This is where the complete understanding of that particular SOA record, and you understood this is the primary server, this is the responsible admin address, which is mail address we can say, okay. So we have discussed about this complete SOA record.